It's Spoilerin time, folks. Our companion show to Cordkillers, where we've actually watched shows. Instead of just talking about how to watch, where to watch, we watched them and we talk about them. This week, we're going to be talking about the Larry Sanders Show, the season finale, episode 13 of season 1, and the season premiere of season 2 of the Larry Sanders Show. We'll also talk about Mr. Robot, episode 9, season 4, the movie Knives Out, the movie Jojo Rabbit, Watchmen, season 1, episode 7, and the Mandalorian, season 1, episode 4. I'm Tom Merritt.
So much doggone good television. Hello, I'm Brian Brushwood, and we are joined by Fraser Kane of Universe Today. Man, I know you're only here for part of our stuff, but let's jump in by mocking everyone except for Brett and Tom in the movie draft. Tom, I think a lot of movies are underperforming expectations.
Well, Frozen 2 is not one of them, though. Frozen 2 is overperforming. John Teasdale on my back, on my 6.
Yeah, but
he does
also
not have enough movies, I don't think,
right,
to make a big move. But it is for the first time making me think like, oh, well, I guess if it just kept, I mean, there isn't much else. Playmobil, the movie, isn't really going to change, but that's also John's movie. Well, hold on. The thing that gives me comfort, though, is we don't have numbers in our spreadsheet here for Queen and Slim, which was my movie, and actually did surprisingly well considering.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough juice in the tank for John Teasdale. Frozen 2 would have to do some extraordinary, unprecedented moves to even be a threat, considering you still have, you started off with the #1 top performing rated R movie of all time, and you're wrapping up with another, what's your last movie again?
My last movie will be Cats.
Cats is, everybody's mocking it. Everybody's acting like it's not going to make all the money in the world. Spoiler alert, it's going to make all the money in the world. It's going to be a close thing. I'm going to predict right now that you're going to be around or close to $800 million. And I think if at this point, I believe that Brett will just barely edge you out. And for the first time ever, a sub 100% return on investment movie will win the draft.
I think that's quite possible. The other thing I want to note is that the Frozen 2 Thanksgiving weekend receipts are not here in our list. If you add those in, it's quite possible Teasdale takes over #1 temporarily.
Briefly, but he's got nothing left in the tank. Playmobil's not going to make anything close to Lego. Even Lego Movie 2 couldn't make Lego Movie 1 money. Certainly not
Frozen
Playmobil.
2 will keep generating funds through Christmas, though, so that's something to keep an eye on. That's all I'm saying. All right, let's talk about the Mandalorian. The Baby Yoda love keeps coming. It's not a baby. It's not Yoda, but we're going to call it Baby Yoda because that's just what the internet has decided. The child's name is, and speaking of on Cordkillers, Fraser, we were talking about the Criterion Collection and Seven Samurai. This is definitely a Seven Samurai inspired episode of The Mandalorian.
Yeah, so I hope you guys are like, just no matter what you say, it doesn't matter because Baby Yoda, right?
We have to bracket everything up.
Yeah, I have no ability to provide any critical input, opinion about this show at all because Baby Yoda in my heart, even better this week. So you just like look at Baby Yoda with hearts in your eyes, and you have the critical part of your brain just shuts down.
Man, I'm sorry, but
remember what happened.
Even past the age of 40, I'm still too much of a teenage boy to admit that in public. You know, I tolerate Baby Yoda for all the action and brutality. The episode itself, and also keep in mind, every time I watch it, #1, I'm just thrilled that there exists a television show that our entire family excitedly gathers around to watch. Like, I have those memories from being a kid. I'm so glad to have that experience back in my life. Can't believe I'm saying that. I'm genuinely thankful that they're releasing these episodes week over week because they are giving me what I crave the most in my media consumption, an opportunity, because I can't get the whole. We tried to do this with Lost in Space. We all liked it as a family, but everybody couldn't control themselves and they all watched at different times, whereas we're forced, there is, so to speak, there's only one time per week we can all gather and watch this, and I'm very thankful for it. Having said that, This was, I thought, the least good episode. Now I'm going to make a distinction here. It is not my least favorite. Episode 3 is still my least favorite because episode 3 had a couple of moves that I thought were totally unearned, like the Mandalorians all showing up and the weird Superman salute thing. I really disliked episode 3. I disliked on a relative scale. This one I thought was fine. It was very much paint by numbers. It was very much Seven Samurai. It was very competent. I liked a lot the fact that for the first time and to the highest degree in the history of the entire Star Wars franchise, they made a single ATST a credible, terrifying weapon. And that was a lot of fun to see it portrayed as essentially a dragon that needed to be slayed. Not a lot you could do in the amount of time that they allotted for it. It did feel a bit unearned that he would settle down in this, pastoral life in this particular village. The chemistry wasn't really there. But look, Mandalorian's like sex, bro. Even when it's bad, it's good.
Yeah, it's in general, the show is fine. It's fine. But Baby
Put
Yoda,
that on the poster.
it's fine. It's all fine.
Fraser Kane from Universe Today says, I think some other things happened, but Baby Yoda.
Exactly. If you took Baby Yoda out of it, I would be a lot more critical about this show. But just like watching him bleep bloop buttons on the spacecraft control and fighting with the Mandalorian over that was gold.
Yeah, I mean,
sold the whole show.
I was delighted by this episode. It is a pause episode. It's interesting because I felt like the first 3 were sort of a trilogy of a story, and I was curious where we were going to go next. And I kind of like that they gave us a moment to rest and relax and recover before we make the push into the next story. It doesn't make a lot of sense that he could think he would get away from the fob tracker when we don't even know how the child is tracked.
We were wondering that.
Yeah.
How is everybody tracking them?
Because it works. It's a thing that works. It's Star Wars, hand wavy stuff.
Don't make me go into my Universe Today knowledge, space science to, critique.
Yeah, because
Baby Yoda.
I almost don't want them to explain it because any explanation is going to reveal a hole that I will start picking at. If they just go like, yeah, the child gets tracked, it's tracked and the trackers work because tracking, I'd almost prefer that because then I can just sort of MacGuffin it and say, all right, fine.
I think you're actually nibbling at the edge of something that I think is important. Up till this point, every episode has been very good at sleight of hand, of moving so quickly that it's just like, don't think about it. I'm sorry, is there something else shinier and more interesting over here? This is the first episode where there was not constantly something shiny to distract me from having those thoughts.
Sure. But at the same time, I enjoyed it. I loved the idea. Like once I accepted that he would think it was possible to hide on a planet, it then made sense for him to get away from the one area that people land because that hides the kid even more. It made sense for him to be tempted to get away from that life, but ultimately refuse it because we all know that's not who he is. It certainly made sense that they would tantalize us by saying, I never take the helmet off. Except when I'm alone, and then show him sitting facing out into the courtyard with the helmet off, wondering like, okay, does this mean he's showing his face to them or is he in the shadows? And so he thinks he's safe. That was all fun stuff. It was all good character. This was a very character-based episode. Like you say, Brian, this is not a story-based episode or even a plot-based episode, really.
And tactically, that the final scene where they are able to take out the walker. Yeah, I thought that worked out really well, that they had dug a deep hole in the water and then put themselves just out of sight with a weapon that was somewhat dangerous to the walker. And so the walker had to get a line of sight on her in the water. And for it to finally them to just take a step forward that should have been safe. You could see that they thought it might have been a trap. Like I actually thought that actually worked pretty well. And that's sort of half the fun of the whole Seven Samurai genres is A-teaming the defenses of the town so that it allows them to overtake this threat. And I thought it was fine. It was fine.
Can we speculate? And at this point, if you're somebody who is so sensitive to spoilers that we can't even reference things that are in the previews for this, then don't listen, because I want to speculate a little bit about where we're headed. In the previews, there's definitely a scene where a female is gently lifting up, and we see the Pedro Pascal's face, and we see the Mandalorian, and we now know what the significance of that is. That once the helmet's off, you can never put it back on. Does that makes me feel like there's an arc where he learns to love a person, and that this ends with him appearing to put his Mandalorianness behind him to live a provincial life, and then which only would set up in classic gunslinger Western style. Next season, he thought he was out, but there's some reason to pull him back in, whatever that is. Do you think there's anything to that?
I didn't see that in the preview, so I can't speak to it. I missed it.
I didn't see that either, but it is
I'll have to go
Pedro
find
Pascal
it. I'll be the first to admit that memory is a funny thing, and maybe it was a still that I saw that I conflated in there. But I'm fairly, man, I don't think I totally invented that. Somebody can chime in. I will certainly introduce the possibility of it. I mean, that would be, look, anything's possible, but that would be a weird dream.
The part that I can speak to is they definitely set up the idea that he was tempted in this episode of like, gosh, what if I did just set this Mandalorian? Well, no, I can't do it because I'm committed to that Mandalorian life. So if we were to have another temptation, it wouldn't shock me, right? It would be like, okay, we've set up this idea that he would at least think about it. I also don't think we're done seeing the woman that he interacted with in the village, who was secretly a really good shot. She obviously has a backstory, and I think she'll play into future events as well.
Yeah, and what I love is that they're giving us enough time away from each of these interesting characters so that we can all be shocked. I say shocked when they all show up to save the day and band together to form an amazing, quartet by the end of this first season.
You have spoken.
This is the way. All right, Fraser, we're going to let you go there unless there's anything else that you want to say about The Mandalorian.
That's where our watching history overlaps. This is where I have to depart.
No problem. Thank you again for joining us, man. It's good talking to you, as always.
Take care.
Universe Today and all the things, universetoday.com, Universe Today on Twitter, everywhere you can go and think Universe Today, do it, and help Fraser out. See you later, man.
All right,
let's talk about Watchmen. So Brian, we've actually come back from the trip of last episode, and we're starting to weave storylines together in this episode. We get a little bit of insight into Lady Light. Lady Truth? What's her name?
The
woman building the Millennium Clock.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I forgot. Her
anyway, somebody will say it in the chat room in a second and wake this old man up inside me. But basically, we find out that she has cloned her mother and is raising that clone and slowly implanting memories. Lady True, thank you. Slowly implanting memories into her. And at the very end, we find out that our hero Angela has been secretly married to Dr. Manhattan this whole time.
Yeah. So I tried do you remember years and years ago? I might have even been before we were doing the show, as it was called Cordkillers. There was a study where they had a bunch of short stories, and the control group just read it straight through. The other group read the end first, right? And as an experiment, there is, because HBO sticks to a fairly rigid, structured release time, and you see people kind of real time chatting on Twitter. I was like, wouldn't it be kind of fun just to not so much actually try to ruin anything? I once joked about the moment Song of Ice and Fire came to an end, jumping forward an hour and change ahead of everyone and shouting stuff, which I didn't do and wouldn't do. But I did think it might be interesting to know where things end. So I did. I just went straight to the end scene. And I watched her turn and clock her husband and rip out a chunk of him and see the hydrogen symbol. And I'm like, all right, well, I wonder how that ties in. And to my astonishment, having seen the end, in no way robbed me of a single surprise during the entire show. And in fact, maybe made it better because I could at least not feel quite as adrift as I might have otherwise. I think I may continue this experiment and do it again, Tom. It was.
Oh, that's really cool.
It was really interesting. And, because of course the story jumps around anyway, and every little individual vignette tends to stand alone from a cinematography, from a storytelling beat and all that stuff.
The thing you risk are I'm going to just assume the overlap here is big enough with the rest of the internet. The Baby Yoda moments, right? Like there are those moments where if you didn't know it was coming, the first time you see it and are shocked by it, you turn to the person you're watching with and you say like, "Oh my gosh, can you believe this?" You could lose those. Those are the moments you risk, but those moments are so few and far between. I feel like you actually create a different and special viewing experience by doing what you're doing. I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah. Meanwhile, let's talk about that end scene. At this point, I no longer. I'm announcing my emotional affection, but I'm drawing friendship boundaries between me and Justin Robert Young, who loves the source material too much that he's not enjoying this, and that's fine. He doesn't have to enjoy it. I'm loving this. I'm loving everything about all this. Dr. Manhattan secretly gave himself amnesia, been living as a human being all this time. Great. Don't mind it one bit. I liked it quite a lot. What about you?
I really liked that we're getting Dr. Manhattan, and that he was hidden in front of us the whole time. I don't care that doesn't really make sense.
Right.
It's fine. I think it's going to be explained in the next episode more, and it'll be explained enough to my satisfaction. And I enjoy the fun of that surprise enough to totally embrace it. The only part of this episode, I actually liked all the Lady True stuff too. The only part of this episode where I felt it's starting to get overwrought is the Vite stuff.
Nope, I loved all the Vite
stuff.
I loved it. I loved the silliness of the trial.
You asked me what I thought. This is what I thought. I think that I'm tired of the comedy. It was fun for a couple episodes. Now it's just overwrought and one note. And okay, fart jokes, are funny, but that was the only part of this episode where I started to feel like it was dragging and I was checking my watch because I'm like, I need something to progress here. And this is just silly.
That's so interesting because I didn't find anything funny about that fart scene. I felt like it was a press release of this is all going according to his plan. That utter dismissal of the entire proceedings and his refusal to even pretend like he's going to, like they've already established he's so super smart. He's Rick Sanchez. He's the Rick Sanchez of this world. So unless they establish that he's mentally deranged and losing his mental acuity, which they very much have indicated quite the reverse, he's as sharp as ever, then that means in that moment that he just crassly dismisses this whole thing. Means it's like that thing Morty says. It's like if you think he's lost, then he's won. If you think you've got him, then he's got you. If you think you've got him in prisons, you're the one in prisons. Like that's exactly what I'm just. All of that to me was just like, get ready. It's gonna be good. We're gonna let
I got that like 2 episodes ago. Like, yes, he's in a fancy cage. Nothing that happens inside of it matters. That's why he can just constantly kill people. And last week we finally got out of the cage and saw him leave a message. I'm way more interested in who's going to respond to that message. And all we got this week was more of the like, oh, he's inside the fancy cage where nothing matters. It just didn't get me going this week. That's all.
Yeah. I didn't mind it. I felt like, you are 100% correct that essentially nothing happened, but in order to get a strong release, you got to pull that rubber band way on back. Sure. So that's what this episode was.
And I'm sure that's what's going on. And I'll be super excited once that rubber band snaps. Don't get me wrong. All the Angela stuff though, I thought was great. I'm like the choice of having her tapped into an elephant It's some kind of mad genius to me. Like, it's not what I expected. It makes sense in this weird world where giant, squids can fall on Manhattan to be like, oh yeah, I guess an elephant, that ain't nothing to that. Elephants never forget. We're involved with memories, so I guess it makes some kind of sense there. I don't even know what to make it, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even be surprised because I think they talk about something about like the original host of the memories. If you told me that they teleported her grandmother's or grandfather's consciousness into the elephant because it's the only brain complicated enough to handle human consciousness or whatever, I'd be like, yeah, that's great. I'm down for all of that. I know it gave me that most valuable of surprises, a genuine surprise.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else on Watchmen?
Nope. I continue to like it a lot. And get it and stay excited about it. I don't know. Are we moving into Mr. Robot? Because Mr. Robot increasingly feels like homework. We'll talk about that later.
Well, no, but tease ahead. We will be talking about Mr. Robot in a couple minutes. Let's talk about our two movies real quickly first, though. I went and saw Jojo Rabbit. You had already seen it, and it was delightful. I found it amazing. It was just so good, and it was not at all what I expected. Even though I expected it to be funny because it's Taika Waititi, I didn't realize that it would be a funny but also complex and compelling narrative of World War II, and what it meant to be a Nazi was treated with so much more complexity than I would have expected, without being forgiving. Right? Just saying like, hey, you know what? People were told this, you know what? 10-year-old boy wants to do, fit in. And you know what this boy did? He tried to fit in. And this is where he ran up against the problems with that. And this is the problem with that. And I found it masterful that Taika was able to balance comedy that could really just be offensive, right? With a very true to life story.
Was there ever a moment that there's a lot of rules they break in, to my mind, delightful fashion? You know, all of the anachronisms, everything from the dancing at the end clearly being from 70s era, to Nazis high-fiving. The high five hadn't even been invented yet, to the opening sequence being the German version of Come Give Me Deine Hand, by the Beatles, which wouldn't be recorded for another 20 years or whatever. Was there ever a moment of those that felt like a misstep to you? Because I was so all the way bought in on every bit of that. Even the moments, I think Rebel Wilson might have been one of the most guilty of stretching credulity. But I never minded it, not for 1 second, not with one character.
No, and in fact, I think it's one of the most important parts of the movie especially because they begin with "Come give me deine Hand," "Come give mir deine Hand," is that you shouldn't be paying attention to the details. This isn't a biopic. This isn't a history. This is telling truths that are ephemeral. And if you get bogged down in the details of whether this patch or that boy would have been part of this version, you're going to lose the point. And they tried to inoculate you against that perspective really early. And the other thing it made me think of was what's that period piece about Queen Anne with Olivia Colman in it that was out recently, where they do like disco dances in this period piece from the 1600s, right? It was also that just kind of absurdity thrown in there a little bit as well.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to announce that there was never a moment that it lost me, and it so easily could have with those bold maneuvers. I really adored that they didn't oversell the fact or feel the need to overly explain the fact that Sam Rockwell was a closeted gay Nazi. I thought they did just the right amount of over-the-top comedic, but like we get it. Or, if you don't get it, it in no way takes anything away from the story. I thought its ability to blend the absurd with the harrowing, like that visual of old citizens taking up arms and just being like, well, we got to fight to the death and off we go. Like in a weird way, I believe that's exactly how it looked and felt. I mean,
Brilliant point. Like that is exactly why they want to give you anachronisms, because you're going to say like, well, that didn't happen in Berlin, but it did happen,
Right.
and it was the feeling. It told you so much in the feeling that it gave you, even though literally those events didn't happen. Right. I think that's one of the brilliances of this movie.
Boy, and I can't believe I didn't go in expecting like to end up crying by the end of it, because I just spent so much time. That first 20 minutes is so transgressive. It's like they have to inoculate you against the fact that we're going to say Heil Hitler a lot, unironically. And then like they just get it out of the system. And it's like, you're looking around at the rest of the folks in the theater as this kid runs around Heil Hitlering everybody. And then like,
it's so disrespectful that I wasn't sure I'm like, okay, so he can't go serious, right? He's just going to keep going crazy. And so when he turned serious, that's when the movie blew me away, because I'm like, wow, he turned serious and made it work. And I don't feel that this is disrespectful, even though little kids were running around doing Heil Hitler earlier in the movie, which shouldn't work on paper.
Those moments, some of those Hitler exits were just so good, diving out the window and whatnot.
All right, let's talk about Knives Out, which in some ways it has some similarities in telling a veiled story through another medium, but is not at the level of Jojo Rabbit in any sense. But I thought it was a fun little murder mystery, and I liked that they played the game. Rian Johnson played the game of telling you how the murder happened and who the murderer was, ish, or at least you thought he did. Midway through the movie, and leaving you other mysteries to unravel.
Oh my gosh. And not only that, he does a great job, because he starts with the introduction of the nurse saying she's above reproach. She will throw up at the very thought of telling a lie.
Oh, what a great device. Yeah, I love that.
So immediately you're thinking like, okay, what if all of this is an actor faking or whatever? So then he removes that and takes that away by showing the actual moment of all of that. So now it's like, well, now are we watching the story of her getting corrupted? And so by the end of that second act, you do have the credible threat that this person that we all want to like, instead, there's somebody, man, I forget which podcast I heard it, but somebody said that every, who's the guy that does Transformers movies?
Michael Bay?
Every Michael Bay plot is always a character says, I'm awesome. Act 2. Wait, maybe I'm not awesome. Act 3. No, I'm awesome.
I'm awesome.
And that's what we got with this nurse. I liked that, and it was a complicated, interesting story. The framing and cinematography, of course, gorgeous. I don't know if you noticed the fact that at the beginning, they're always framing the knives halo thing, but they're always off on the side, and it's only as he gets closer and closer to the truth that it gets closer and closer position in the middle, to where finally he's sitting on the throne with all the things, and he's got the answer. He's finally solved the whole thing. I liked all of that. I did notice something that I couldn't tell if it was a presentation mistake of the theater I was at or an intentional choice. But the Mr. Robot, we've talked about the cinematography. They love headspace, right? So in a 16:9 format, they'll oftentimes have a character take up just less than 20% of the screen, and they're talking the wrong direction, facing in the corner with like 8 feet of headspace over them. This was the reverse. I don't normally notice these things, but there was almost no headroom. Oftentimes, people were cut off just above the brow lines, or background characters.
No, it was the same for my showing too. So I think it was the intentional framing. It must
okay,
have been.
because that was the other thing. Is like, I know, because I used to be a projectionist, that back in the old days you would have to set, if you were in a scope theater and you had a flat presentation, you had to set that manually. But I'm like, this is digital, so this has to be on purpose. But I suspect what he was trying to do is create kind of a claustrophobic sense
what I thought.
Out of that whole thing.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But it was fun. It was a great murder mystery. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
I liked that kind of all the kids are garbage except for Jamie Lee Curtis, and she was the only one. She was the only one who you might have perceived as having been robbed of her inheritance, but they had so firmly established that she was a person of character who truly made it on her own and would have made it, with or without daddy's money or whatever. And emotionally seems the least affected by finding out that there's no inheritance. I thought it was a great balancing act.
You thought she was even keeled in the inheritance scene? Because I thought she was. I kind of took her as a straight shooter, and that's why she was very upfront in that scene.
I'm thinking specifically at the end, because by the end, she uncovers that her husband's cheating. She takes swift and immediate action, and she, smoking that cigarette and watching the nurse ride off, and she just sort of has this yeah, well, it is what it is. This stoicism about it. And she is the only legitimately successful person that wasn't just a hanger-on in the entire family. I think they alluded to in the beginning that she began with a loan, but that it got paid.
The $1 million loan.
Yeah, but it's pretty clear that she's made it, and that her husband was hanging on to her success. Another faker holding on. Like she felt like the only true daughter or child out of that whole bunch.
I loved Toni Collette's performance too. I just have to throw that in there at the end. It was just amazing. I thought she stole the show every time she was on screen. All right, let's move on to Mr. Robot, episode 9, season 4. I call it the trapdoor ending, right? We didn't meet another personality. It is still sort of up in the air whether that fourth seat just belongs to Elliot or something else. I don't think I got resolution in my own mind about that, but we also got the hack. It got pulled off. It's over, right? This is it. Why do we even have another episode, Brian? They won.
Oh, I'm sure there's some kind of dead man switch. I think we all knew Price was going to get it. Price knew it the moment he walked in.
They did surprise me about when he got it. I was not expecting it to happen on the steps like that, but the more he talked, the more uneasy I got. So it wasn't, yeah, you're right. It wasn't a true shocker.
To me, the real joy of this episode was that they did such a good job of showing, not telling, and making it clear a fairly complicated, hack where it's like, oh wait, let's intercept this tower. Let's intercept traffic. Let's do all this third party, device validation with one-time codes
all
and all that stuff.
The sim jacking and getting in and stealing the credentials to get into the tower and stuff. That was all super realistic.
Yeah, I think that there are two stories that needed to be collapsed. One is the story of, was it the Dark Army being denied their prize and shutting that down. But now there is one more story to tell, and that is of Elliot Alderson achieving peace. And so I think that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, that seems right. We've now, barring the zombie getting up one more time, which I'm not ruling out, we've closed down the Dark Army. Their money is gone. We've closed out the mission, so to speak. In fact, I think Mr. Robot refers to it as the mission. And that was what he said. We needed to let Elliot do the hack. Then he can reveal the last thing. Then he confront him with the last thing. And it was confusing for me because a lot of what Mr. Robot was saying to the other two personalities in the office conference room was similar to what he was saying when they were revealing to Elliot that his father had abused him. And he was like, he's not ready. You shouldn't tell him. It's not time to reveal this yet. And yet he already knows that. And the only clue you get is Mr. Robot says, then we'll tell him what he did.
I will say that I think there'll be one other piece of the puzzle, which is what they do with the money. And I think that there's going to be some kind of message of, hey, this all began because I resented the idea of the top 1% of the 1% having all the money and all the power. I thought I could fix it by breaking the concept of money. That didn't work out so well, and turns out it was exactly what they wanted. So finally, we got the money. Now I'm going to do the thing that I should have done at the very beginning, which is take all of that and give it to the bottom billion. Congratulations. They're all, they're now, those who are hurt, the farthest behind are caught up, or et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Do you think?
Yeah, somebody needs to brings up an interesting question in the chat room. What about insurance? When someone takes your money, the bank can just give it back. I think this is probably a situation where it's too much money for the bank to just give it back, and it's probably such a hidden account that it doesn't have the insurance that it might have had otherwise. But that's an interesting question. Could be a way back.
And also
the Dark Army.
likely not under their name, so they can't claim to be the aggrieved party if they
yeah, exactly.
Basically however hidden the money is, that's how good the hack is, so that the money can't be brought back.
And assuming we're talking about millions or billions of dollars, like FDIC in America is what, $100,000 per account?
Oh sure.
Yeah,
you would not.
And again, that's for an account in your name.
Right. Do you think, because we saw White Rose pull out the like sci-fi second world, Angela's still alive, I've got a way to bring people back, hinting at some sort of parallel or multiple worlds theory. Do you think in the next, the last 3 or 4 episodes we've got now, that we're gonna see a reality to that idea?
I think we're going to meet halfway, and we're going to find out that White Rose believes it. But that's as far as it goes.
Okay.
White Rose truly convinces us that that's why she's doing all this, that she truly does believe it. And then Elliot said, yeah, but this is our reality. And your reality is that you're going to jail forever or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the fact that they had him bring it up again, like, you almost convinced me about Angela, makes me think that there's another shoe to drop on that story still.
Yeah, and if it's okay to say one thing about the next week on, one of the things that they say is we need to go back, or I need to go back to Watership Town, or what is it, the township that they grew up in?
Washington Township.
Washington Township. So there might be more.
Yeah, that could be White Rose trickery, saying like, no, she's here, she's real, this is the location. It's true because I said these 3 facts that surprised you. And so then he's like, well, even if there's a chance, I got to know, or whatever. And opens the door, and it's crazy crayon drawings of a magnetic part.
I mean, the gambit for White Rose would be to ask for the money back, right? Like, I will let you meet Angela if you give me the money back. You have it. You could transfer it back to me.
I mean, he undid the original hack. I would not be surprised if the personalities
that's
made that happen
interesting.
again with this too.
One last con, like while she's behind bars, she gives enough proof to convince him that maybe it's real.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else about Mr. Robot?
Nope. It's very, very good. Just slightly less exciting for me every Sunday night than
really
Watchmen.
This is my favorite episode of the season. Maybe one of my favorite episodes of the show.
Wow, that's awesome.
Fantastic.
All right, let's talk about Larry Sanders Show. Season ender, where it was kind of a little bit of an in a can episode of like, we need to stop Hank from doing the hey now thing. It's too much, and also trouble getting bookings. And then it was a Hank episode essentially. And then the premiere of season 1, which was actually a 2-parter, so it was 40 minutes long instead of the usual 20, where suddenly we find that Larry has separated from his wife, is getting a divorce, and Art keeps trying to set him up by booking actresses on the show that he goes on dates with.
I am really glad that we watched these two back to back, because season 1 ends with a small world problem of trapped in the tin can of running this show. 2 people can't help but get miffed at each other, and there's a power dynamic that, of course, Hank can't bark at Larry, but Larry, is just so fed up with Hank kind of running longer than his leash as far as all of his bookings and all the sponsors, and constantly overusing the hey now or whatever, that the 2 of them have their little dust up or whatever. It seems, like you said, very much kind of in a bottle, right? And then the first episode 2-parter of season 2, no, he's got real problems. Like, the show's in jeopardy, his mental health is in jeopardy, his marriage is in shambles. Like, I kind of deeply appreciate that we're seeing such a difference between those 2 dynamics.
Yeah, the season premiere, I guess that actress who played his wife left, because there's a weird appearance of her in the Hey Now episode that is almost irrelevant. She's just there, and they all say like, "Oh, hey, Gene, it's nice to see you." And I almost had to go back and look at it again to be like, did I miss something? Until I realized I was watching the beginning of season 2 when they just suddenly said, oh no, she's gone to Chicago now. But we meet Larry's previous ex, Francine, which I think she has now replaced the original wife probably as a recurring character.
Yeah. I possibly at this point, I got to be honest, I'm not so emotionally invested one way or the other, right? I'm much more emotionally invested in sort of the Game of Thrones of staying alive when you're the fourth big late night talk show. And it's very clear, his is a lower tier show. They're acknowledging Leno, they're acknowledging Letterman. They're constantly talking about Arsenio. It's pretty clear he's kind of fourth place and knows he's kind of desperately, to be honest, I'm almost getting a bit of a Dunder Mifflin vibe at this point where there's a bit of anxiety in the office about whether or not they're going to close down this branch.
All right. Anything else on Larry Sanders then?
No. Continuing to love it though.
Fantastic, folks. Thanks for joining us and letting us spoil you rotten. We hope that you come back again and support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Cordkillers. We get these episodes a little earlier, plus some bonus content too. We'll spoil you again next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.